Hello and welcome to Smooth Musings, Smooth Fusion's podcast. And today we're going to do the third and final installment in the series we've been doing on what goes into the design and implementation, launch, and ongoing maintenance of an enterprise website. And so if you missed the first or second installment of this podcast, you might want to go there first. We talked about the things that happen in the design and discovery phase, and then we talked about the things that happen during implementation. And today we're going to talk about the launch of your new site and the maintenance and support that comes after that. So, and again, this is a high-level overview. We'll have other podcasts that'll dive in deeper into these, but the purpose of this short series is just to give you that kind of what to expect at a high level. So today I've got some more of the Smooth Fusion team here with me. We've got Janae Allen, our VP of Production. We've got Justin Bubel, our Director of Development. Dylan Eccles, VP of Customer Success. Braden Mason, Director of Project Management. And Gary Evans, Director of IT. And so we're going to kind of recap a little and then talk about the launch itself. So we're going to go back here to Justin and Janae and just let them from the dev side and implementation side talk to us a little bit about what's going on right as we get ready for launch.
Yeah, so just before we're in this pre-launch phase, as developers, we're looking to get through all the work that has been determined to be core functionality to the application. So at a certain point along the way, software is ever evolving. We're going to have to establish a sort of a cutoff point for the features that will make it out in the initial launch and some things that we're going to push to later down the line. And we will establish a freeze on those features that we've already implemented and ensure that we complete the implementation for those and get them onto the development site for testing. So while those are being tested and reviewed in QA, and there's a period in time where we're not writing any new features and we're just fixing any bugs that may come back from that testing procedure, that opens up a window for us as developers to go and document a lot of the code we've created and processes that will be valuable to the end user that they can, so we can show them how to utilize the software we created when the new site finally does go live.
So is it fair to say that in almost all cases, we are going to launch, by the time we're launching, there are changes and features and things that have been added to kind of a backlog that are generally at some point we're just going to launch without absolutely everything done?
Yeah, pretty much without exception. You're always going to have things that you would like improved upon, but at a certain point we have to establish that we want this out there, we want it in the world, and there's things that we've created that are great and we want to be leveraged and utilized, and we can incrementally improve that over time. That's why we take the approach we do in the methodology, so that we can make the site better, but still have something that's very functional while we do that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Janae, what do you have to add to all that?
Yeah, as we're preparing for all of this to go live, we like to have a staging site. Sometimes not everybody needs a staging site or wants one, but essentially we need to have some place where before launch, the client can go do all their user acceptance testing. We can do our final run through, checking of the code, make sure all of our tasks are done, QA is done. And part of this time we spend making sure like all the third-party integration keys are set up, your Google APIs or any kind of CRM that you're connecting to. You're going to want to make sure that you have all the live keys or that you have all the domains whitelisted in those systems, so that you can make sure once you do go live, then all those integration points are working still. Even your SMTP settings, just double checking all that to make sure like the from address on your emails are correct, that your subject lines, everything is all set up there. And one thing that we do is if we are going to have a staging site, we like to have like a full copy of the dev database just copied out to staging, and we'll do some, and Gary will talk about this more about rolling out the database. But one thing that we do, because since we copy out the devs database, is we, as developers, make sure we clear out any test data or any test data that the client has put in place, QA has put in place, just to make sure that whenever the site does go live, it has all of the correct data and everything is ready to go.
Very good. Well, you mentioned Gary, so let's go over to Gary. What's assuming we're hosting the site, which is most of the time in our case, but not 100%. But assuming we're hosting the site for our customer, what's kind of the steps that are going on next?
Yeah. So when it comes to me, to the NetOps side of things, I'm making sure, the source code is deploying correctly to a development site and database, which should have been, set up at the beginning, and that should be working well. Janae mentioned the staging site. So we'll make sure the staging environment is set up and it has its own database. Like she said, we'll copy that development database out to staging, check it all there. Then we'll make sure our production environment is set up. It has its own database, of course, as well. And then it has a warm-up slot so that we can swap those to prevent downtime and warm the site up and make it fast. We'll roll out that database. Same thing we rolled out to staging, out to production. And then we'll make sure all that's connected with the CI/CD pipeline, the continuous integration pipeline, which is DevOps for us, and make sure that thing can deploy nice and smooth to all the environments. We'll take the opportunity to check environment variables. So, different API endpoints that might be different on staging from dev, or might be different than production and staging and dev. Or she mentioned SMTP settings. Those are oftentimes different from dev versus production or the live site. So all those different environment variables need to transform as that site moves from one environment to the next. So making sure all that's set up right. And then when we're talking about launch, we have to make sure that Cloudflare is in place. That's the CDN. That's the web application firewall. That's the DDoS protection. So that's all that kind of stuff. So it needs to be set up, make sure we have the right rules in place and a few exceptions for Sitefinity so that it can work well with Cloudflare and the caching that it provides. And then oftentimes we're hosting DNS in Cloudflare as well. And so that final step is to actually swap the DNS to make the change there and point the traffic to the new launched website.
Yeah, and in our vernacular, when we talk about production, we mean the site that the public is going to hit, right? And talk to us a little bit about warm-up slots and how that works and what the advantage there is.
Yeah, that's a great feature that Azure Web Apps provide. And we take advantage of it by creating another slot. So you could think of it as really just another website, but they make it so when you issue a certain command to swap the live site with all the traffic coming to it with this warm-up slot that we just deployed the new code to, it will take everything it needs to and put it on that warm-up slot. And then when you hit kind of a button, it will drain the traffic from the live site and start sending it over to the warm-up slot. So the biggest advantage of that is there's no downtime. If someone is in the middle of clicking a button on one site, they can still click that on the live site. It might load, but then a second later, they'll click again and their traffic has been routed to the other site. And so there's no downtime there for the client or the end user. The second thing we use it for is when we deploy that new code or that new site to the warm-up slot, we will hit every URL on that site to warm it up. So a big thing in Sitefinity is caching. That's so that the site doesn't have to go to the database every single time somebody hits a page. So a lot of those resources get cached. Well, when the site spins up, the first time the site is hit, it has to cache everything that it wants to cache on that particular page. So we use a sitemap and we have a script that runs and it goes through and hits. Sometimes hundreds. We have sites with 700 and 800 URLs that it will go through, and it will hit every single URL to warm it up and make it fast so that once we swap from warm up to live, it'll be nice and fast and ready for people to use it.
That's great. And so theoretically that swap can happen any time of the day.
That's right. Yeah, that's another way that clients can use this, or it's another useful piece for a client when we say, hey, we can deploy during the day and your users won't even know anything. Then they like that a lot better than deploying, at 8 or 9 or 10 at night. And so do we. So it's nice for that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so Braden, when it's time to actually get this thing deployed and launched and get that scheduled, who's going to be on deck for the actual launch?
Yeah, so I think from a PM standpoint, what we try to think of is who internally at Smooth Fusion has the most intimate knowledge about this new site. They're definitely going to need to be there. They know the inner workings of everything that we had just built. That will include at least our main developer and our main QA resource that worked on the site during the build. We'll also include Gary, our NetOps, to handle the actual swapping or DNS changing, whatever has to happen on his end to take this site live so end users can actually use it. On the client side, it goes through the same filter. We want definitely our main point of contact and anybody else within the client's organization that has intimate knowledge of the workings of the site. Some are just content. There's no special functionality, just text on a page that they'll edit every now and again. But some have specialty functionality. As an example, banks will have rates widgets that may be extremely custom and may be maintained by somebody internally on the client side. So we're going to want them there to make sure that data is displaying exactly how they expect it to, and that there are no hiccups with how that's supposed to function. And yeah, that's pretty much how we go about determining who needs to be there. I think another important thing to determine when thinking about launch and when it's going to happen and who needs to be there is time and date. Rarely do we ever launch a net new site that didn't exist before. So you will have existing users visiting your site. So whether it be researching the analytics behind the site to see whenever the traffic is the lowest, or just knowledge that the client has on the best time to deploy, we definitely want to take that into consideration before scheduling a launch.
Okay, very good. So Dylan, let's talk a little bit about just, once the site's live, we've gone through that process of actually launching it, the live traffic is flowing to your new site. Then we go into, what we'll generally call maintenance or maintenance and support mode. And let's talk a little bit about what to expect once we're launched and into maintenance mode.
Yeah, well, Justin kind of alluded to it earlier, is that undoubtedly during development, you've probably compromised and left a few things out for launch. And so you'll be maintaining a backlog, or you should have been. So there's going to be some key items that maybe you feel that need to be on the site post-launch immediately. And so those will usually be maintaining a backlog and identifying what are some of the things that weren't crucial enough for launch but are crucial now. Usually prioritize those, and whoever your development partner is, establishing a cadence and a process for setting priorities and scheduling deployments and everything along those lines, because you have to remember it's a living application. So you'll be making not just database changes or content changes for the life cycle of the application, but also code changes, new features, bug fixes, or accommodating changes to other third-party integrations. So really, it's just about setting. The first step is just making sure that you have the infrastructure or plan in place to process those things and capture those and prioritize those requests. And then something you might do is become a little more proactive. And surely you've integrated like Google Tag Manager or Sitefinity Insights or Google Analytics into your website. So you're trying to identify how customers are using your web application, but then also what is the performance of different areas or key areas of your site. And then you can start to take a proactive approach and make tweaks based off of that. because there's quite a bit more that you can do, and you're really using your website at some point to get insight on who your customers are and how they're navigating your brand. So it's a great opportunity to take advantage of that.
Yeah, for sure. So, and we'll do a lot of other materials on Sitefinity Insight, which is just one of the tools that's out there. But for folks using Sitefinity Insight is a great tool that integrates right into the back end of Sitefinity, allowing you to track what anonymous users are doing, put those users into personas, and then even personalize pages on the site based on that activity, which is great. So one of the things, Dylan, once the site's launched, a big question we get is, how much do I need to budget for ongoing support of my site? And I think, around here, I hear you talk a lot about sort of philosophically how to think of your site as not something you launch and forget. So talk to us a little bit about, what do you tell your customers, when it comes to kind of how they should expect to treat their website on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, and I mean, the budgeting will go customer to customer, obviously, but in terms of like the philosophy, I'd just say that historically, web applications or websites were just static HTML and CSS that people would build and replace every few years. And then they introduced CMSs, which allows a little more control over the website. But now there's even getting to a point of where there's .NET Core and headless CMSs, which extends the life of your application even further. And so just the idea is that a website isn't something that you build and replace every few years, depending on your branding. It's now a tool, and arguably the what's the word for it? Most public facing aspect of your brand, because you may have customers who visit your brick and mortar locations in city by city, but all of those customers from city by city are going to your website. And so you just need to make sure that you're building it in a way that you extend it, maintain it over time, but then also you'll just maybe start thinking about it differently, because there is a lot more opportunity now for leveraging data and taking action on it and integrating new services and things because of API ease of use nowadays. So really, there's just quite a bit to take advantage of that people might not always consider. Don't know if that answered your question exactly, but it's
I think so. And just the fact that there's less reason all the time to think of your website as something that has to be thrown out and redone every few years, because the back end is built on technology that's going to have a much longer life. You have options on how to expose that on the front end. There's no reason you can't completely redesign and rebuild a front end without having to start over on the content side, or even with many of your integrations and stuff. And so just an important thing to talk through with your customer success manager, to just make sure that you're thinking about your website as a long-term asset that you want to get as much life out of as you can, and build in a way that instead of your budget having to be huge every 4 years, you can spend a bunch of money on a website. You can spread that cost out and so that you're not ashamed of your website for the year before it launches the next, because we run into that a lot. People they're really tired of their website. They want to do it again, and just think of the missed opportunities while your site is not representing your business well. And there's really no reason for that anymore. In terms of, on a ongoing basis with maintenance, what are some of the ways that you can, that a customer can organize around getting some efficiency into how we do maintenance on a site?
There's different practices. It's a lot of the times it's circumstance by circumstance. You may have just by default a backlog and priorities of things that you're trying to get out, and you have to realize that each code change typically requires a deployment and up the pipeline and things like that. So there's usually a cost, ancillary cost associated with development work, or each time you're doing development work. So one way you can savings is to batch things as well. But really the most important thing is just having an elastic but rigid enough process that you can maintain predictability and not having uncontrolled code commits going to your environment or unfinished code being deployed and things like that. So, really in terms of of maintaining the cost and being cost conscious, it kind of doesn't change from the rebuild. Is what are your brand's goals? What are you trying to do? Does the site not allow you to do that? Is this change worth the cost in terms of its return on investment? But really just being, what's the word for it, mindful of the changes and decisions you're making for your website and how you want them to deploy. That's really is just the best way to stay cost conscious. Because you may have features you want, but then Microsoft could update their .NET framework one night and make you scramble to change something on your website that you weren't anticipating. So it's just really important to maintain your priorities and then be prepared for changes on the web that affect your website and that you need to accommodate, is what I would say.
Yeah, and that's a good point. As part of ongoing maintenance is also, the systems you're integrating with can change, APIs change, things like that can happen. Let's talk a little bit, just for the last couple minutes we have here, let's talk a little bit about upgrades and patches to the underlying software. So obviously, these days with cloud hosting, we're not as maybe close to server patches in the traditional sense. But if you've built your website on Sitefinity, for instance, it's going to get an upgrade every year, and potentially in the mid-year, minor upgrades or even security patches. And so let's talk about that. First of all, I guess just what's the importance of keeping up, obviously keeping up with the latest versions of your CMS? What's the advantages there?
Yeah, generally CMSs are releasing a major version every year or something like that, with minor versions throughout the year. The best part about them is getting the patches for bugs and bug fixes or anything along those lines. Known issues. That's typically a main reason to upgrade, so that you're not dealing with some of the inefficiencies that are caused from bugs and things. But then the other one is new features, is that these CMSs, as they release major versions, they're incorporating new technologies and languages and things and approaches that you can benefit from by upgrading to those as well. There's security concerns, and it comes down to two, if you're on a proprietary CMS versus an open source CMS. But so, in speaking about a proprietary CMS, usually there's a subscription-based service, and these companies that provide the CMS are offering support services. They're offering upgrades of features, new features entirely, new integrations. So really, it's just about keeping your site dynamic and safe are probably the easiest way to put it.
And eventually support will end on old versions as new versions come out. So obviously it's important to keep that within the last couple of versions, generally at least, to kind of stay on top of things. Well, this has been good. I appreciate everybody's time, and we just hope, for those of you who are listening, we hope that this has been helpful. Let's say if you didn't catch the first two segments of this, we encourage you to go check those out as well. And like I say, our goal here has just been to kind of give you a what to expect as you go through the process. And obviously, if you've got any questions or things you'd like us to address in a future episode, we'd love to hear those. Please get on our website and give us your feedback, and let us know what we can do to get you the kind of information you need on a future podcast. So thanks everybody, and thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to Smooth Musings. If you liked today's episode, make sure to subscribe, share it with someone, and rate us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. This podcast is presented by Smooth Fusion. If you'd like more information about Smooth Fusion and how we help our customers with websites, custom software, and more, go to www.smoothfusion.com.